This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And here we are. It is that time of the year. My favorite time of the year. I kind of like, it just takes me back, to when I think about De La Soul, maybe a little Call Kanai, maybe a little LL. You know what I'm saying? It's the fat era. But we're not doing it from a hip hop perspective. We're doing it from a free agency perspective. And it's been a while since we've been doing our thing when it comes to the coveted Fat Tracker. And the NBA does not disappoint with all of the stuff that's been going on in the last 24 hours since free agency has begun. So let me go roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man. It's www.shawsports.net. Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, ripping out Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? Is your head still connected to your shoulders from all of the free agency whirlwind stuff that's been happening in the last 24 hours?
Well, let's just say we thought that this was going to be somewhat a subdued summer. We talked about the free agency class not being all that exciting, but the aspect of people making moves and trades wasn't as anticipated as I think we've seen as well, too, in addition to one huge fish becoming available, in Paul George, opting out of his Clippers deal, which we'll obviously get to. So this has been a much unanticipated whirlwind, I think, of activity in some ways, and that is changing the landscape. A lot of the trades happened right after the finals ended as well, too. The Knicks trade, which we got to touch base on here as well, too. Like a lot has happened in the last week or so since the NBA finals concluded.
Yeah, and I think, we're going to probably try to run through as many of these transactions as possible. What I think is really interesting, Shaw, is that I think everybody who's been honing in on this, or maybe has been honing in on all of the mainstream sports shows that cover, all of the free agency stuff that's been going on, I think I've had a hard time really trying to parse out what really is a reflection of the business side of the NBA and what ultimately is, the player imagination side of it, or what we dream up, or what we, always kind of pontificate, so to speak, when we're trying to put together what would be the ideal team, putting players in the ideal situations or in the ideal destinations and stuff. And I think since the new CBA agreement, which is now, you can honestly say, has been kicking in full tilt, I think the stark realization is people ain't gonna have it their way, whether you're an owner or you're a player.
No, for sure. And, money is, there's a lot of money to be had, but there's a lot of penalties for the proverbial rich, especially when it comes to that second apron and some of those teams that want to keep units together. The league has really shifted into an NFL model where they want parity. They like the fact that 6 teams have won championships in the last 6 seasons. First time since the 70s, I believe. You don't have the repeat or this level of just inconsistency in terms of repeat champions. And that is something that the NBA is proud of. I think the governorships and the owners of the NBA, they like this as well. But I think from a team building standpoint, as a general manager, this becomes really frustrating because you might cultivate some really great talent, and then you're going to have to give them up in a couple of years as a result of not being able to keep all the pieces together. But hey, to the rich go the spoils. And as I say, winners get the right history. And this is a very, very unique time in the NBA and an ever-changing landscape. New money is coming in with the new TV contract, in the next year or so as well. So we're going to be continuing to having these conversations with these outrageous, really outrageous numbers right now. A guy like Isaiah Hartenstein, who we'll get into, he's going to make more money per year than Kobe Bryant did at one stage of his career. So it's just a sign of the times, brother. And it's a really, really interesting one to kind of be a part of in this NBA landscape.
As they say, business is booming, sir. Business is booming.
Sir.
All right, so we're going to get into a lot of the stuff that's been going on regarding free agency with our coveted free agency tracker segment, and we'll do that in a few moments. But we also have a special guest who's going to be jumping on board with us in a little bit. Our man, Lauri Murray, who's with The Athletic. He's going to come you know what I'm saying, from his busy schedule, so to speak, hop on board and really talk about the state of the Los Angeles Clippers, you know, as only he can do, and kind of help put things in its proper perspective, because obviously the Los Angeles Clippers got a lot of work to do as themselves as well. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. As always, get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at Game Face Lee, the show's Twitter handle, NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You can go to www.thebaselinenba.com to not only check this episode, but also all of the episodes that we've been posting for you for the longest time. And if you see us on YouTube, maybe one day we'll be on YouTube TV.
For sure.
Hint, hint, you know, expand, broaden your horizons, diversify. If you catch us on YouTube and you see the blue and white logo, that means we're with the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group family, we're running these content streets. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to not only just check out me and my mans, but also check out the family of great content creators that represent the 19 Media Group family. Shaw, let's get right into it. Let's start talking free agency tracking. And we'll, you know, obviously the big noise that has lifted and elevated the conversation of the NBA to the forefront is Paul George deciding to opt out in his final year with the Los Angeles Clippers, making himself an available free agent. And he's decided to go to the Philadelphia 76ers. But not only did the Philadelphia 76ers lock in Paul George, they also extend Tyrese Maxey, 5-year, $204. They bring back the OG, you know what I'm saying, the yard boss, Andre Drummond. He's back on a second stint. And they also signed Eric Gordon, snatched him away. Kelly Oubre has also returned as well, too. So by all accounts, when you look at this team, everybody, I think even Tim Bontemps, I believe he says, with Paul George, that makes them the most formidable three-man team, you know, in the NBA, snuff the Boston Celtics as NBA champions. Maybe he's just specifically speaking of three players and not, you know, like 4 or 5. But does this move the needle for you when you see what the Philadelphia 76ers have done, outside of the fact that they clearly are pushing their chips all in and making sure that Joel Embiid has got a squad that is ready to compete and make that, you know, elusive run that has evaded them to get to the NBA Finals?
Yeah, it's a great move on paper. Daryl Morey strikes again. Things just broke incredibly well for them to be able to make this move. We kept saying, hey, the Sixers have all this money. They kind of planned for it to come around this year, but was this really the year in essence where you could do something with it? Paul George opting out, Joel Embiid tampering, whatever you want to call it, on national TV. I think this was all kind of in the works, maybe even previous to that. We'll talk about how the Clippers fumbled the Paul George situation, or if they actually did. But the Sixers are in poise right now to make everything go in a way that they should be title contenders going into next year. Again, assuming everybody's healthy, you have to figure out the fit. Even the aspect of Tyrese Maxey not getting hurt, willing to allow this to play out so that he wasn't eating up cap space going into the summer so that they could remain this flexible. There's a lot of things that have broken right for the Philadelphia 76ers here. Now, my biggest question here now is truly the role delineation between PG and Maxey behind Embiid. PG seemed to struggle with the fit when Harden came into the Clippers, where I really didn't think he should have. He's clearly a better player and better scorer, at least, than James Harden at this stage of his career. Does he feel the same about Tyrese Maxey, or will he take shots away from Maxey? How will Maxey feel about that? That's where, Nick Nurse is going to have to make sure everybody eats in a way that's positive. Or does Embiid say, you know what, I have two really elite level guys, take some of the load off of me? That's where I want to see what ends up happening. But the talent is clearly there. Andre Drummond is more than a capable backup behind Embiid. Obviously a great rebounder, decent rim protector. Getting Kelly Oubre to return is great. Eric Gordon, another scorer off the bench, replaces Buddy Hield, presumably so. So that's my initial thoughts on the Sixers. Is on paper, yes, but you have to go out there and run the X's and O's. And I'm concerned about the role delineation of that big three.
I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, Shaw. And I'm not going to be long-winded about this. I really don't love this for Tyrese Maxey, and I don't love this for Joel Embiid. it's amazing to me that we're at this particular stage again. And like, listen, credit Daryl Morey, because Daryl Morey does moves that makes Daryl Morey look like, this savvy, executive. But what has that yielded? What is exactly has that amounted to? And I really think, Philadelphia 76ers fans, I think people in general should really, take stock into what I'm talking about. We had the same conversation with the Colangelos when they were running things here. It looks good, but what does that actually mean? What in the grand scheme of things is that actually supposed to translate to? And I've said this for the longest time. Look, I love Paul George as a player. But when Paul George is not being tasked with being what his numbers represent, meaning his dollar amounts represent, he's a much better player. I just don't know if we'll ever get that version of Paul George. And when I say that, I'm saying the Paul George that represented playing for the Indiana Pacers, the Paul George that even in that little in-between stint playing for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Anytime there seems to be money involved, and I'm not saying no player should not get their bag or get their money, but anytime money is involved when it comes to the type of player Paul George is, it seems to be that the money dictates more about what the expectations are for Paul George and what Paul George really should be bringing to the table for the teams that he goes out and he represents for. And it'll just be interesting because now you're basically conceding to the idea that Paul George is going to be okay being the third wheel when he's always believed that he's been a 1A, 1B type of player. And regardless
he said he knows he's a number two.
I get it. But
okay.
What he says is not what he does. You know what I'm saying? And that to me is where the problem lies. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be long-winded about this. I'm thinking that you already have a dynamic 1-2 punch with Tyrese and with Embiid. And where I would rather see the utilization of this roster really become effective is plugging in the gaps of things that the Sixers truly lacked that couldn't get them over the hump, like their ability to shoot the basketball and setting up plays with an innovator like Nick Nurse to give them those opportunities. Whereas with somebody, you're basically saying, well, I want another person who's going to be able to get his own shot, meaning that there's going to be the ball's going to stick to another person. Where I wanted to stick more to Maxey and let Maxey be out there doing what he's been doing and showing improving to you the last couple of years. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, Shaw. But I wasn't completely enamored with this because, again, I just think that there are two ulterior motives here. And not all of it is all coming to the same place about making sure that what you're putting on the floor is going to be a contending Philadelphia 76ers team against the likes of the type of team that they're going to be playing against, not just in their division, but also in the conference altogether. The matchups, I think, are going to matter so much more in the Eastern Conference than I will think that they will be in the Western Conference, because the Western Conference still is laden with all kinds of talent, but they're all going to, you could even make the argument that they're all evenly matched. And at any given night, any of them can be done. I still don't see where the Philadelphia 76ers have done completely everything in their power to usurp the perception that they can beat the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks. Or the teams who have been basically hanging around the top over them for the last 5 or 6 years.
All right, well, then let's transition the conversation a little bit. Just, we didn't get a chance to talk about the Knicks in general. So let's go there before we get into what was the next big free agent or, move in the summer so far. But the Knicks did acquire Mikal Bridges while we were off air and didn't get a chance to have that conversation. So clearly teams are loading up, in the Eastern Conference specifically. Hey, we need to have multiple guys who can switch and defend and play offense. And the Celtics are the NBA champions. The Knicks go ahead and play a king's ransom to get Mikal Bridges into that lineup, continue to complete the Villanova Knicks, if you will. Now, my biggest concern with the Knicks roster, and again, we have a lot to get to, is I don't mind the Bridges. The pay is way more than I think, but they're paying for, and we talked about this in chat, they're paying for a chemistry aspect that they feel like can't actually be bought. We'll see if that comes to fruition, because then I want to see how Randall plays. I think Randall is the key to this. The Knicks played very well without Randall the latter part of the season. Obviously made that great run in the playoffs while banged up. He's going to have to take a much lesser role. He's going to have to become a better defender than he's ever been to be able to fit with this. What are your thoughts about Mikal Bridges added to the Knicks and their elevation in the Eastern Conference that many seem to think they just lost another key piece too, in Hartenstein, but with Mikal Bridges, they feel like they'll be all right.
So now the Knicks have made themselves a much smaller team. But where I think this team may suffer is their ability to be physical in the front court space. And in a matchup like this, and you notice I didn't mention the New York Knicks against the Philadelphia 76ers because I truly think that what has happened here now may compromise the Knicks' ability to defend a team like the Philadelphia 76ers. They could have a problem defending a team like the Milwaukee Bucks, right? They may be able to go, 6-7 games, the likes of the Pacers, maybe even with the Boston Celtics. But that means that Mikal Bridges is going to have to sacrifice and do things that he wasn't accustomed to have to do, that he wasn't accustomed to needing to do, when he played with the Brooklyn Nets, because his role was so dynamically different. I mean, he essentially was the man. He was the featured person. He doesn't necessarily have to be the featured person, Shaw, but the brunt load of the intangibles that the Knicks are going to not have access to unless you're asking Randall to do, which he's never really had to do because his whole dynamic changed when he was playing more outside of the circle, right? He was shooting the ball more. Now you're going to ask him to get down in the blocks and punish people coming fresh off of the injuries that he's just been coming off of. This is part of the reason why I question it. I don't question your desire to continue to build a culture and the chemistry if you felt the need to get Mikal Bridges. But that should have already been a sign that you should have figured out a way to move Julius Randle and keep Isaiah Hartenstein, because to me, he was a much better fit for what that style of team now with this dynamic and bringing Bridges in can allow you and afford you to do more and plug in on the front court perspective of things. If Randle struggles the way that he struggled the early part of last year, come this year, oh my God, the Knicks fans are just going to freaking lay his ass out every single. And then what good is that going to be? He's arguably going to be your centerpiece in the front court position. And I just don't know whether or not that's going to hold true to water for the Knicks to compete against the upper echelon teams who are going to be a mismatch problem against teams that are bigger.
All right. Well, why don't we kick the break, pay some bills here really quickly, finish off, with the other hot take news that's happening here in the NBA free agency circles, brother, because there's a lot to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we do that, are you ready to elevate your fantasy sports experience? With Prize Picks, you can win up to 100 times your money. I said it, 100 times your money. Imagine turning a $10 entry into a whopping $1,000. The summer is full of sports, and there's no better time to get on the action. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select player stats projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. With the finals over, the hoops action doesn't stop on Prize Picks. Women's basketball is still heating up, with stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves alongside greats like Breanna Stewart and Asia Wilson. You could win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. Prize Picks is the best way to mix and match your selections across sports. Sean and I grew up playing baseball, so we love to mix a little variety with our picks from America's pastime. And for those of you who love a quick win, Prize Picks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Plus, with quick withdrawals and an enormous selection of players and stat types, it's no wonder Prize Picks is the go-to app for fantasy sports. So what are you waiting for? Download the Prize Picks app today and use promo code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's right, Prize Picks will match your deposit, giving you more to play with. Remember, with Prize Picks, it's as simple as picking more or picking less. So let's get those entries in and watch the winnings roll. It's that easy. Don't forget to use the promo code CLNS to get your deposit match. And stay tuned for basketball insight right here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Let's play and win together with Prize Picks. More Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw. Don't go away. We're back. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And joining us, our man, burning the midnight oil. You know what I'm saying? Might be on fumes, man, with the way that the free agency has already gone into a frenzy. Our man, Lauri Markkanen from The Athletic. Law, thank you for hopping on board with this, man. And really, one of the things that I think most of us have been tied into a lot has been the nature in the way that the business has been handled between the organizations and with their star players. And obviously, the big topic of conversation, because Paul George has made those headlines with him opting out. I think the other questions that we, as people who are covering the NBA, are already on, rather than people still stuck on the emotional aspect of things, is what is the state of the Los Angeles Clippers? Did they have a backup plan? Was there a plan B in motion, recognizing the possibility that Paul George may not want to stay at your Los Angeles Clippers?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been confused about the fact that they were valuing Paul and were interested in Paul coming back, but didn't do everything in their power, take advantage of all the things that they have advantage to or access to as far as tools to retain your own players to make sure that Paul was going to stay. And I look at it like this. A year ago, the new CBA, we hadn't still gotten it yet, but at the draft, in 2023 draft, the Clippers brass met with the media, and we knew that we were waiting on this document any day now. You know, I still had my hair out, so I was like, I'm gonna set an appointment. You know,
lots changed.
Get my new cornrows and everything. The day that it comes out, I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna comb through it while somebody, you know, working with my hang time, right? And they hinted on that day, hey, Kawhi and Paul, they've been great partners. They understand that we can't do what we did before, you know. And I heard that last week when I was at the facility after the draft. We're asking, because at this point, the context has changed. Kawhi signed the extension in January. And Paul, the offers had been on the table since September. He hadn't signed it yet. And they tabled, you know, negotiations in February. Now it's coming down to the last weekend of this. What are y'all going to do? What are y'all going to do? Clippers were confident that even if he opted out, they would be confident that they could resign him. But that's also kind of a tell where it's like they were cool risking losing him because they knew that they had to do things differently in this new era of the collective bargaining agreement. If this was the previous collective bargaining agreement, Paul probably doesn't even reach the open market because they would have just paid him and dealt with whatever consequences came with it. But those consequences now are more punitive. You can't build your team that way. Did you see the Clippers win a playoff series this year? Did you see them win one the year before? Did you see them win a playoff series the year before that? No, you did not. So I think that the price had to remain firm. And if Paul really wanted to be here, then he'd be here. But respect to Paul George, he found another option, another team, a good team with room. That doesn't always happen every offseason. You know, you get your Detroit Pistons type teams that have cap room and are like begging someone to take their money. That doesn't always happen.
Where he hit up his boy Uncle Morey. He hit up his boy Uncle Morey. Morey, yeah, like, you know what I'm saying? Hey, Uncle Morey, can you help me with my kid's college fund on that extra?
Yeah, like, and the irony is, you know, the Sixers would have been interested in James Harden, but again, they did the same thing. They told James, we have a price and we're going to probably let you go. And I think the Sixers would have been prepared for James to opt out and go from there. Instead, James opted in and demanded to go somewhere specific. And James saw how difficult that process was. It took 4 months for James to get traded from the time he opted in to the time he actually got to the LA Clippers. Paul George didn't want to go through that. He knew that a team could just sign him outright if he just opted out. And that's what wound up happening. And so the Clippers backup plan is, in the short term, you're going to be competitive. The backup plan is James Harden. You have 2 stars still. A lot of these teams in the NBA, they have, quote unquote, 2 stars. And that's the backup plan. The backup plan is, in the short term, you have 2 stars, you're going to compete, you're going to open this new building. And then over time, because you're not paying Paul George that 4th year and dealing with the punitive penalties that come with that, you are going to have an easier, not easy, easier time trying to get to a point where the next big fish that comes along, whether it's more likely in 2026, you can see a pathway towards creating a roster where you can open up the space to attract a player to come to Southern California and play NBA basketball.
Well, I want to ask you the aspect of Philadelphia specifically, because obviously James and PG were teammates for the last year. PG goes to the place where Harden was spurned, if you will. Do you have any insight into that and what that conversation might have looked like? And for PG, was it just a combination of like, yeah, that's you, bro? Like that was your experience and my bag is here and an opportunity to still compete for an NBA championship is over there as well too.
Yeah, it's a business. All these players talk. All these players have their own things that happen, and this is about Paul securing the bag. I think it's as simple as that. James had a long-standing relationship with Daryl Morey. James got what he wanted for a long time. I really think that it would be naive for Paul to go to Philly and think that he's going to be there for all 4 of the years of his contract, no matter what. You know who has the best insight on that? Paul George. The last time he was a free agent was 2017. What happened? Everyone thought he was going to go to the Lakers. He didn't even leave Oklahoma City. He was happy to re-sign on a new 4-year deal. Do you know how many years Paul George played in Oklahoma City on that 4-year deal? You guys want to tell me?
It's 1, isn't it?
1.
Yeah.
He played 1 year, and he asked nicely to get traded to the Clippers. And the Thunder were happy to oblige once the Thunder knew that it was coming with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a long-term project in terms of building a piece to their future. Danilo Gallinari, a good player in the short term, and a whole host of draft picks from the LA Clippers. The Thunder did not win a playoff series with those assets until this year, and they still got upset as the number 1 seed in the semifinals. However, the Thunder made out pretty well. They're not mad at Paul George. Oklahoma City loves Paul George. I've been to Oklahoma City with the Clippers, and they've cheered Paul George. You'll wonder why, right? And so Paul shouldn't be naive. He knows it's a business. He knows whoever you sign your contract with, that thing can move. So when it comes down to it, man, I think that these players, they know that, ownership groups are the way they are, front offices are the way they are, the coaching staffs are the way they are, these locker rooms, you have an influence on that too. And, these markets are the way they are. Like Paul's about to go to a market that it ain't OKC, it ain't Indy. It's not the Clippers version of Los Angeles, okay? I've been to the Clippers facility. We're surprised when there's a bunch of cameras up in there, And it's like, what y'all here for? With the Lakers, that's every day, right? It's different. Now, when you go to Philly, I'm from Philadelphia. Yeah, like you better be ready to play for that city. And I think Paul George had to get to the point where he is, and I'm excited to see how it's going to go for him.
So, well, let me ask you this question. I want you to just be straight up with me, Law. Are you a pro Paul George player? And when I say that, I'm saying in relation to you and how you've seen his game evolve in the years as a Los Angeles Clipper in preparation for what the expectations are going to be for him going to the Philadelphia 76ers. And because now Paul George is going to Philadelphia, what is the expectations for Kawhi Leonard and James Harden in making this thing work to be competitive, losing those intangibles that Paul George is taking with him over there to Philadelphia? Because I think these are key things that has always been a misconception or a misnomer to me. And as I've watched Paul George throughout the course of his career, I've always believed that he's been a quality player, but I've never seen him as a 1A, 1B player, maybe 2A, right? In fitting in the right situation. However, through these situations, like when he was in Oklahoma City, you saw spurts of it, you saw glimpses of it. And then when he's in Los Angeles, maybe I just completely misconceived, and you closer to it than everyone else between us. I still struggle to figure out where Paul George fit in the grand scheme of the money that he was getting, the expectations that was there, because LA is a big market. And it seems like in the smaller market situations, he thrives, he stands out. I'm just really curious, like where are you on the scale when it came to Paul George's tenure as a Clipper and what he should be expected to do as a Philadelphia 76er?
I mean, especially the context of how he got to the Clippers, not just what they gave up to get him, not just that he came with Kawhi, but also, I mean, I don't even want to say glimpses in Oklahoma City. That dude was third in MVP voting and Defense Player of the Year voting in the same year, his second year in Oklahoma City, playing as Russell Westbrook's sidekick. He was legitimately a top 5 player, an outstanding player, and he never reached that level as a Clipper. That being said, that dude is one of the best basketball players in the world. He is incredibly versatile on both ends of the floor. And I say this as someone who's been able to watch him, who's had to study him, who's had to figure out what the heck is up when he has underperformed or has floated through games or has disappointed in playoff series, because I've also seen him excel in playoff series. I've also seen him lead comebacks. I've also seen him completely overwhelm teams, whether he's been the 1, the 2, or the 3, as both positionally as well as pecking order as far as touches on offense. He's asked for a lot, but he's also giving you a reason to want him to be supported. And I saw all that for, certainly these last 4 years, but even his first year with the Clippers, I saw him have to overcome shoulder surgery and to fit into an offense that he didn't think he fit, but he fit incredibly well because he's that versatile, that effective a player. So going to Philly, the best thing that he's going to have in Philly is that he never has to be the 1A. You're playing with Joel Embiid, a guy who is an alpha, a guy who not only has an MVP trophy, but feels like he should have had more. And some of the reasons he hasn't had more, it's the fault of maybe, things that he couldn't control, but it's the fault of things he could control. Joel's going to be highly motivated next year, especially missing as much time as he did due to injury, and seeing how the season went for the Sixers, seeing how James Harden wanted to leave that situation. There's going to be, that Sixers team won only 2 playoff games, okay? So there's going to be an attitude that all those guys are playing for something. Tyrese Maxey is already one of the most stand-up dudes in the league, has an MIP trophy, just got paid himself. That guy's going to take pressure off of Paul George because he's literally the point guard. That was probably the biggest sticking point, the biggest conflict that Paul had as a Clipper. There was always this search of who's going to play point guard and how are they going to play point guard. So now that flips to the Clippers. They're going to miss Paul George. Let's not pretend this is some kind of addition by subtraction. No, don't be stupid. He's going to be missed because he is that good of a shooter. He's that good of a guy on the ball. And he's a guy who at 6'8", as a defensive playmaker, as a guy who is respected by defenses and offenses, you have to account for him. The Clippers are not going to replace that, period. What the Clippers can do is they can play hard. They can be more together. They can understand who's doing what offensively instead of questioning what the identity is of the offense. That's going to be the responsibilities of the leaders, which is going to be Kawhi and James Harden. And it's going to be the responsibility of the new guys that come in. And it's going to be the responsibility of guys like Terrence Mann and Ivica Zubac, who've been described as the fabric for everything that the Clippers have stood for over these last 5 years. It's very complicated. The Sixers are better. The Clippers are not. But the Clippers are still going to be competitive, and the Sixers still have things to prove. And I'm excited to see it all.
Law, let me ask you this aspect now, right? So PG comes off the books, in terms of that money, so to speak. They've already made some moves. Derek Jones Jr. is there. Nick Batum returns, ceremoniously or unceremoniously, depending on, your take. If you
it'll be a ceremony, man. We love Nick Batum got a lot of love out here.
Plumlee exits, goes over to Phoenix. Now there's conversations about Westbrook. He opts in. Will he get traded? PJ Tucker, same situation. Will he get traded? New stadium. So this team wants to be competitive. I wouldn't even call it a mid build. They still want to be competitive and be in the thick of the hunt in the Western Conference. But kind of what's next? Can they do anything to attract? I guess the biggest free agent name out there is DeMar DeRozan. I don't think the money works potentially there, but what are you expecting the Clippers to do in essence to remain as competitive as you expected them to be next season?
Yeah, well, whether they brought Paul back or not, whether Paul opted in and they found a trade, I've been saying this for most of the last, I want to say, 20 months. They need to get an upgrade in athletic size. So I'm glad that Nico's back. They need to upgrade the athletic size on the roster somehow, some way. And at this point, I don't think that's going to come from the power forward spot. I think Nicholas Batum, Kobe Brown's a first-round pick who I'm not sure what his opportunity or pathway is for him to be able to win a job, but I would actually expect him to compete for a starting job, But I think they have enough guys who they qualify as fours, especially if you consider Kawhi Leonard being on the roster and playing that spot last year, and Derrick Jones Jr. being added to a team that already had Amir Coffey, who's on the team. You have Terrence Mann and Norman Powell both under contract. Like, those guys are probably going to play more together. Russell Westbrook is someone that the Clippers have made it very clear they're looking to move on from. You still have James Harden as a starter, and now they have other guys that some of them I'm not going to really talk about on the show right now. So the only spot that I can really see them realistically upgrading is the backup center spot. I feel like they need a guy who is athletic, can protect the rim, can space the floor, but also do some things inside. Just be a basic big man, finish, be a vertical threat, rebound. To find that player might be a little challenging, but I think that's the next move. I don't think DeMar, if DeMar is willing to take a significant pay cut to come play for the Clippers, then okay, I just don't see the pathway there. I think DeMar is going to get a better contractual situation somewhere, and he deserves it as well. Like, that dude is a bucket still, even at his point of his career. So I'm looking to see what the trades look like. They got to get off of PJ Tucker, and they've already signaled that they're not interested in the kind of player Russ is. And they don't have any centers on the roster outside of Vince Zubac. They don't even have any pretend centers. So I think that's the next move outright, and then we'll see what the trade market develops. But the Clippers look like this could be their roster a week from now. I think they should be done their business.
Lauri Markkanen joining us here on the baseline. I want to get back on this thing you were just talking about regarding Zubac. In a few moments ago, you had mentioned to him about him and Terrence Mann as being the fabric of the Los Angeles Clippers. Do you believe that his time as a Clipper has come to a pass, or do you still see there a pathway for him again to be that successful, to have that level of success? Because to your point, the problem now that we're seeing that's very evident in the Western Conference, Zubac is not, his matchups, he's not going to be favored in a lot of the matchups now that you're finding in the Western Conference, whether it's the Minnesota Timberwolves, Los Angeles Lakers, even the bigs. Derek Lively now is coming, is coming of age, so to speak, athletic, big, small in size, but creates problems out in space for a guy like Zubac. Do you think that the Clippers should still maintain with Zubac, or you believe it's more about, hey, maybe we find something, because you can still have a traditional big maybe on other teams, but for a team like what the Clippers represent and what they want to do, shooting the basketball, things of that nature, given the Western Conference, would there be a mismatch problem for him?
I think Zoo's a mismatch problem for a lot of those dudes, to be honest with you. Zoo does two things extremely well. He's one of the best post players in the league, and he's one of the best rim protectors in the league. And that's full stop. Like, he's going to be involved in even more offense with James Harden, because they don't have a Paul George type player who's going to dominate more touches outside of Kawhi Leonard. That's going to be,
so we're going to see old James. Like, you want to see old James, you know what I'm saying? Houston Rocket James Harden, where he's more involved with the big rather than ISO.
That's something that they worked on last year. Zoo had arguably his best year offensively, because it was the first time really in his entire career that he was working with a pick and roll orchestrator like James. And that was in the context of, again, you had Kawhi and Paul playing more games than they had played probably in their entire Clippers tenure. Like, they fit in a guy that didn't go through training camp with them. Like, they were figuring that out on the fly. They started James and Russ together, which just canceled both of those guys out. Neither one was effective. Russ lost his touches, and we know that Russ off the ball is not the best usage of him, especially if you're parking him in the corner, not involving him in the offense. And with James struggles to be comfortable catching and shooting and just moving in general. Like, there's a reason the Clippers started winning games with James once they separated James and Russ to start first and third quarters. And so, Zoo got better as James worked with him. James gets a lot of credit from the team for having Zoo and the other centers, but especially Zoo, the starter, work with him in the pick and roll game, where to catch it, what to do on the short roll, things like that. they're going to have to lean it more into it because they need more sources of offense when you don't have a great player like Paul George on your team. Now, what they do need is, I don't think Zoo is a 30, 35-minute player. That's why the backup big position is important. If you do want to play small or at least play more on the perimeter, you do need more versatility at that position. The last time, really probably the only time they had an ideal player in that role was when Serge Ibaka came over from the Toronto Raptors to replace Montrezl Harrell back in 2020. And the thing with Serge was the idea was great, but his body was declining sharply.
Yeah.
His back didn't make it through that season. And we never saw Serge Ibaka as far as being a contributing NBA player ever again, really, after that first season with the Clippers. If they can find that player, and I don't know who that player is, but if they can find a facsimile of a player who maybe isn't good enough to be a 30-minute starter, but is good enough to be a 20-minute guy, maybe it's a 4 or 5, someone who straddles those positions, someone who could play with Zoo as well as spell him, that's going to be what helps the Clippers as far as building their roster. But I think Zubac is an underappreciated player because he is a bit more traditional. He's not the most skilled guy as far as passing and as far as shooting with range outside the paint. But what he does well, what you ask your centers to do, he does at an extremely high level. And I think we're going to see if the Clippers value that enough to extend him this month. But at the very least, he's going to be more involved in what the Clippers do going forward this season.
Last two for me, Law, is the aspect of Ty Lue, and what he's been asked to deal with. I think as a coach, obviously he got an extension here recently as well, and his ability to really coach up the rest of this roster. And then the second part of that question is just from your opinion. I think the Clippers had to do what they did in pairing PG and Kawhi together. Like, you take that chance, similar to the Brooklyn situation. You take that chance, but it's very easy to dance on the grave here now and saying, "Oh, the Clippers are going to clip, and they're never going to be this, whatever." Like, especially Laker fans, like they're having a parade, and they're not much better off, so to speak. But your thoughts on the whole experiment, with this group, and now Ty Lue's ability to clean it all up here and push this thing forward.
You mean the group going forward, or the group that is broken up?
Well, Ty Lue, now what he has to do to push it forward, his ability to make it work, so to speak.
Right. Well, I'm happy for Ty Lue. He got his deal. It was maybe a little overdue, but Tyronn Lue, I feel like he had a great season this year, especially in the middle where they were 26-5 and very briefly climbed to the top of the Western Conference in February, which a Clipper team has never done. And so Ty Lue is really good at two things. He's really good at putting players in position to succeed, and he's really good at dealing with a lot of BS. Like, that was a hard team to coach. Just because you have proud dudes who absolutely deserve to be proud because they've won championships, or because they've had long careers, or because they're going to be in the Hall of Fame. You got to manage all that, and you need to communicate it effectively. And that's hard. That takes a toll. He's getting paid for that accomplishment. But I think about the 21-22 season when Kawhi was out the whole year, and when Paul George was the centerpiece until he got hurt with a multi-month elbow injury, and you had to find a way to stay afloat. And that team finished 42-40 with Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris Sr. being at the top of scouting reports. That to me was like, well, you got to pay this dude. And maybe you don't pay him now, but when Kawhi and Paul come back and you see what you're going to see, it's like, well, lock this dude up. Well, they disappointed. And last year it ended in disappointment, but they didn't have a disappointing year. Like, it was a disappointing finish in conclusion, but they absolutely played outstanding basketball. And so Tyronn, I would hope, for one, he ain't worrying about a lot of this Clipper stuff right now. He's about to try and help Team USA win gold in Paris on Steve Kerr's staff there. So, and hopefully Kawhi can play, but he's going to come back. He's going to feel some kind of energized, especially depending on how the Olympics go. And he's going to get to work. He's going to go into having an identity. He's going to lean into James. We saw one of the reasons why I was like, oh, James is going to be back with the Clippers. they leaned heavily into James. And you know what? Maybe that cost Russell Westbrook and alienated him somewhat. Maybe that made Paul George feel like, well, I'm going to get the bag. I'm not going to come back just to be back here with this. But I can tell you, James Harden is going to be a big piece of what Tyronn Lue does offensively. And I think Tyronn Lue is going to be focused on trying to build a good defense. Tyronn Lue is going to get some energy from not having the same voices because Jeff Van Gundy is going to be on the coaching staff. And that dude, Jeff Van Gundy, hasn't been able to be a coach, like an actual season-long coach with one team since the Rockets let him go back in, what was it, 2007? Like, it's a long time. But it's not like Jeff Van Gundy hasn't been in the game. It's not like the game's passed him over. He was literally, he had the best broadcast job you could have calling the NBA. He got to see the best NBA games for, what was it, 16 years or whatever. That's going to energize him. I think that's really the main thing. They need a vibe check. They need, and Tyronn Lue's a big part of that. Tyronn's got to come in there and not have like this attitude of, oh, I guess we're not going to be that team anymore. I guess we're going to wait for the injury or wait for guys to get old and fall off. No, you come in there and give guys a reason to play hard. You give guys a reason to want to defend. You give guys a reason to feel like they're going to have a role and be, involved in what you're doing. And I think Tyronn knows that. It's not just that he's a guy who's won a championship as a coach. He was a journeyman too. He's been in situations where he's been a champion, but also been on some of the worst teams basketball's ever seen. So that perspective matters. You need to be able to communicate as well as be able to set guys up for success. And that's Tyronn Lue's going to have a big role in that. But he's been here before with this team. It's probably better to have James Harden and Kawhi Leonard than it was to have Paul George and really no other stars as it was in 2021.
Yeah, we'll end it like this, Law. I think what you just said is apropos. I'm not putting this on all on Ty Lue, but I do think I see more resignation from Ty Lue than I have seen more of that appetite, like that what made him an antagonizer, a pain in the ass, when he was out on the basketball court, and even in the first couple of years when he got his opportunity to coach up the Cleveland Cavaliers, you saw more fight in him in the sense that it seemed like he spoke to the guys, inner warrior, to come out and to put it all on the line, even if it was just for a short stint. And these last few years, I just felt like maybe, and I didn't notice it until you basically brought it to light in that particular sense, the way that you kind of, eloquently spoke to it. There just seems to be a little bit more resignation in the way that he speaks to things, like he's rationalizing things, not making excuses, but it just feels like, all right, if this now is a different iteration of what we see for the Los Angeles Clippers, what you're hoping to see more is he figures out a way to pull out that James Harden, dog James Harden, like, what I'm saying, coming out, just balling out on cats, Kawhi Leonard, the silent killer, that kind of person. Like, I think we all want to kind of see Ty Lue channel that, what I'm saying, and bring this version out of the Los Angeles Clippers, which I think will dispel a lot of the, what I'm saying, the joking around that's been taking place over the last couple of seasons, given the circumstances that have impacted.
Yeah, like I think it's going to be, and that's why I mentioned vibe check. They got to really get guys that are going to be committed to a program. And you know what? That can be a little difficult when you got veterans, but the expectations are in a rough spot. When you got guys who are still going to be playing for money. Like James signed a 1+1. And every year, you got to get to a point where you can actually get paid, you never know when it might be your last deal. So James, as good as he is, it's like, I think he's going to be a big part of that. But Tyronn Lue, I think it helps that he's only going to have probably 2 stars to coach. And I think that he talks and communicates and connects with Kawhi on a level that I don't think he ever really did with Paul. Not to say that the relationship was bad, just to say that, it was good with Paul and great with Kawhi. I remember T. Lue saying something last year along the lines of, I don't really talk to guys in the offseason, except I'll call Kawhi. I'll touch base with Kawhi every now and again, which is significant because, Kawhi Kawhi's notorious for being hard to reach. I think they have a connection there. So Kawhi represents serious hoops. When he's out there, it feels like the adults in the room. With James can be a little silly about certain things. Like I literally saw this dude close out while Kawhi was taking a shot in Portland. That happened. But James is serious about the game of basketball. He really wants to work. I think all the shenanigans and BS from last summer, you got the opposite this year. James didn't even bother with free agency, Like James is going to spend this entire summer. He's already started. You've probably seen him working out with Kevin Durant, Chet Holmgren. He looks great. He looks like he could play, 30 minutes today. So the vibe though, like they got to get the young guys to be on the program. They got to get the vets. Like Nicholas Batum coming back is surprising to me, but it's a pleasant surprise. That's a dude that literally got traded to James get here. Nico was not happy with that. And he's still going to be back here. That's why I said, hey, they're going to celebrate Nico, being here. He's someone that the fans connect with, and there's not a lot of those figures here. So I'm looking forward to how it's a challenge. I'm looking forward to how they all do it. It's stars, it's the coach, it's the vets, it's the young guys. They got a lot of work cut out for them. This Western Conference has a way of really kicking your ass by Christmas. So we'll see what the Clippers look like by then. But the Clippers, they've been here before as an organization, and a lot of the key figures have been here before. So I'm not going to write them off just yet as far as, team turmoil or anything like that.
Law, tell the people where we can find your work, man. I know you've been grinding, but, anything else you have coming up for the rest of the summer as well too, my guy.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to The Athletic. Like everything I do with The Athletic, just what they allow me to do, what they empower me to do, I'm really appreciative of. I got a great staff there. And when I say staff, I'm a part of the staff. So, all the writers that are getting to do really cool stuff covering this league, support them, support me. And I'm on social media trying to figure out what to do with that. But I'm at Law Murray the New. We got to keep evolving every year. I mentioned earlier today, like this time last year, Axe or whatever, Axe Twitter, whatever you want to call it, was acting up so bad during free agency. We was trying to go on the other waiting lists, Bill, Blue Sky, Threads. It was like, all right, I'm on all of them, man. I don't know my still login. We on all of them. So that's all I'm going to say.
Man, Law Murray from The Athletic. Law, man, thank you so much for hopping on board. Thanks for taking that time out. You can rest easy, man. Hopefully this is the last one before the night is over. If not, we're definitely going to give you some minutes back so you can get ready to re-up.
All right. I appreciate y'all.
All right, brother. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. This is The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing hot button topics of the NBA. Great conversation with our man Law Murray, who just helped break down a lot of what's going on with the Los Angeles Clippers. But Shaw, we still have so much more that we got to get right into, right? With everything happening with free agency. Dallas Mavericks locking down Klay Thompson, 3-year deal. Bittersweet. Good play for the Mavs. Where are you on this?
Yeah, I mean, great play for Dallas. One of the better catch and shoot shooters in the NBA history, but can still do some stuff off the move. Imagine Luka driving and kicking out to Klay. Like that's next level stuff right there too. Even at this stage, so a lot has been made about his proverbial decline. He still shot 40% from three last year, 18 points a game or whatever. Great situation, but obviously for the Golden State Warriors. To only be able to secure 2 first-round or 2 second-round picks from Dallas out of this deal, as currently reported, that's a porous return, I think, for somebody who's going to have a statue, out in San Francisco, for years to come. So the Warriors are definitely in some arrears here. They're looking to bounce back, but for Dallas, great situation for them as they continue to try to be a title contender going into next season. You know me, man. I love dynastic teams. I love teams because I believe that they have a place. They help elongate the competitiveness and bring parity to the league. So maybe this obviously could be the end of the Golden State Warriors era. But I love this so much for Klay Thompson. If there's ever a time to kind of preserve a player and what he can still bring to the table, this could probably be it. And I think this is obviously a benefit to your point. Just imagining Luka
driving, sucking that defense all the way like damn near underneath the basket, and then just Klay floating around or anywhere he wants and shooting up them threes. I think it's going to be beautiful to watch. If there's ever a time that I want to appreciate watching Dallas Mavericks basketball, this could very much be it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm all aboard. For the Golden State Warriors, though, man, wow, tough. You don't get Paul George. You waive Chris Paul. You extend the period of Chris Paul and his deal, and then you wind up waiving him anyway. And now all that's left is they're possibly going after Lauri Markkanen. I don't understand it. If there was ever a time that I'm wondering and I'm fearing for Dunleavy's career as an executive, this would probably be that time.
Yeah, and Chris Haynes, the reporter, he's out here. He's unintentionally, I think, bodying them, in social media with all the reports. The Warriors are offered this, they turned that down. The Warriors are offered that, they turned that down. So it's tough. And I think with the Clippers stuff, the Clippers turned it down. They were like, no, we don't want Andrew Wiggins and the corpse of Chris Paul to give you Paul George and allow you to maybe potentially go on another, run here in the Western Conference. So there's not teams lining up to help the Golden State Warriors after all their years of dominance and success. And that's the spoils. And, especially with the new CBA, as we talked a little bit about earlier, it's going to be tough. And they are a very, very, very tax heavy team. Klay felt disrespected, and the Warriors now will have to pivot. And Lauri Markkanen is not a bad potential option if Utah were to be able to do that. But, Danny Ainge don't play. It's going to cost. So do the Golden State Warriors have the assets, and are they willing to give up whatever assets they have in order to get a guy like Markkanen? Do they feel he can be that next piece for them? I'm not as confident there, but it would keep them competitive, at least in the playoff hunt in the Western Conference.
Absolutely. All right. The New Orleans Pelicans, talk about making some moves. They get DeJounte Murray from the Atlanta Hawks. In exchange, they move Larry Nance, Down Daniels, EJ Little, and 2 first-round picks. What do we make of this play by the New Orleans Pelicans in keeping their core with CJ, Zion Williamson, and wherever the status is going to be with Brandon Ingram? But to get DeJounte Murray, where are we thinking with this?
Yeah, for DeJounte, it's it departs the Atlanta situation, so don't know if Trae Young is next over there. But it slides CJ McCollum back to what is his more natural position, I think, as a 2. DeJounte goes to get there and create, can provide some defense for them on the perimeter as well. And then, we will need to see what ends up happening with BI, where he ends up. There's a slim possibility he returns, but he just seems to be falling out of favor there. So that's something that we want to watch very closely as the rest of the summer concludes, whenever our show actually drops. But I do like the move for the Pelicans side. And, the Atlanta Hawks can go into the phantom zone. And it looks like they'll be in lottery land here for the next few seasons.
All right. A couple more important news is taking place, especially through free agency. Cleveland Cavaliers make a play and hire Kenny Atkinson. I think it was bad enough you lose Paul, can't move Wiggins, but now you lose Kenny Atkinson, probably one of the more sought after, assistant head coaches and stuff like that. He's now coaching the Cavaliers. What do we make of this? And obviously with the situation going on with Donovan Mitchell and Garland, do they lock down a lot of this stuff? Did things get clamped down and Kenny Atkinson is coming into a really good situation for this as the head coach?
Yeah, it's a situation that he's going to get to be able to build upon. Whether or not Garland is there, you would assume Mitchell will be. So, Kenny Atkinson, one of the better coaches out there, been flirting with a couple of jobs in the last few seasons. So great to see him land in Cleveland, and his predecessor goes over to Detroit, basically hopping cities. JB Bickerstaff lands over there. Tobias Harris signs a deal. Cade Cunningham apparently going to be going there. We talked about Harris, potentially landing in Detroit as well too. And it comes to fruition, it needed to be teams with a certain level of cap and ends up being Detroit. But going back to the coaching side, Cavs get Atkinson, Pistons get JB Bickerstaff. Great situations, I think, for both those teams. JB is a good guy, especially when it comes to building young talent. And that's what the Detroit Pistons need.
And I think it'll be an interesting pairing seeing Cunningham and Harris together. This could probably be a really good situation where I think Tobias Harris can maintain, where he has been offensively, but I don't think it's something where the expectations for what he's getting paid is going to exceed the expectations of the team's ability to grow. And I think Bickerstaff has already proven he can take young players and elevate them to become successful teams. So they'll be competitive. I think a lot more competitive, and I think he'll hold them a lot more accountable than I think the situation called for what happened when Monty Williams was the head coach.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, man. Listen, so much going on, so much that we've discussed in this episode. And this obviously will not be the last episode because then we got Summer League running right around the corner as well, too. And I'm sure that there'll still be moves being made and certain discussions I know that we still have to talk about guys and their extension deals as well too, but there's all summer for us to be able to get into that. And as always, man, great episode, especially with our man Lauri hopping on board and chatting it up with us.
Yeah, we loved it, and the news continues to roll. So by the time this airs, other stuff will happen. KCP signed in Orlando. You talked about the extensions. Celtics ownership might be selling their team. Like this is just it's a wild situation here this summer already. So we'll dive into all of those things. Maybe over the next couple of shows as news continues to break. We'll see where Markkanen lands. We'll see if Brandon Ingram goes somewhere as well too. Where DeMar DeRozan is, but again, by the time this airs, that might already be decided. But we'll definitely bring all that to you all in the next episode here of the Baseline, man. Exciting time in the NBA.
Absolutely. Once again, we'd like to thank you and yours and our man, Lauri, for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Callie Warren Show, we appreciate you guys. We do. We'll catch up with you next time.